Hello, I'm Marian Arrowsmith, and welcome to our show. Today, our guest is Alice Twillie. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Alice was a librarian at Florida Avenue. She grew up in St. Tammany Parish, and even though she's retired, she still comes back and she substitutes. In fact, this year she's been named Substitute of the Year at Florida Avenue. So congratulations on that, and welcome to our show.
Thank you. It's been a long haul at Florida Avenue, but I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Good.
It's nice.
Tell us about where you grew up in St. Tammany, what it was like as a child.
I grew up in Bayou Paquet. That's what it's called now. Long time ago, it was called Bonfouca. I am a fifth-generation native of Slidell. My great-great-grandfather came in during land grant time and bought up a lot of land, which we eventually lost. He sold for like $3 to $5 an acre at some time or another, but it was a booming little area back there at one time with everything, including a post office and a vinegar factory. We didn't make vinegar, you know, it was more like wine and water and everything back in that area, but it was a nice time. It was back wooded area. They did a lot of logging. As a matter of fact, my daddy grew up watching the logs come to the bayou. His house is on the bayou down there in Bayou Paquet. And, well, what's left of it after Hurricane Katrina anyway. But the logs came in by horse and buggy and horse and wagons and stuff, and they floated into the bayou. And across the bayou from his house was a wood mill. And they made the wood into logs, the logs into boards and all the byproducts and stuff, and they loaded them on the schooners. That was a big part of family history.
And you have a picture of a schooner, his schooner here.
My great-great-grandfather owned a schooner, and he and his sons took trips back and forth across Lake Pontchartrain. They brought goods from Bonfouca, from Slidell, from everywhere to New Orleans, and vice versa. They brought him back from New Orleans to Slidell, helping the railroads out, because early on there was very little railroad traffic and stuff. But I talk about my daddy because he grew up, he was the Doucette, and he grew up down there. My mother is from Lacombe, and it's funny, being in education, we talk about school. My daddy is a 6th grade dropout, and my mother was a 3rd grade dropout. Daddy would tell you the story. He loved to go to school. But the only time they had to go to school was during the summertime. For some reason, the teachers were sent just during the summer months, and they went June, July, and August to school, so you had to go 2 years to make a grade. So by the time he was getting old, he said by the time he reached 6th grade, he had spent almost 12 years in school already, so it was time to quit and do something else, but he had to go. He was raised by his grandmother, and
there was a school. What was the school?
The Doucette School was back there. It was, I'm not sure when it started, but I went through and talking with my sister. My sister attended. She was older than I am, so she got to go to the Doucette School. My great-great-grandfather donated a piece of land because the kids were having to walk long, long distances to get any kind of education. So he donated a piece of land, and they built the school. I don't know if the family built it or if the school board built the school, but I know he donated the land and the school was put up. I do know that the school board provided teachers. And that was funny because there were no transportation, or very little transportation back and forth back there. So they came and stayed. Well, who lived the closest but my great-grandmother? So she provided a place for the teachers to live while they were teaching back there.
You have some pictures of...
Yeah, that's my great-grandmother right here, and that's the Captain Edgar who donated the land for the school.
Okay. Now, you said, what's your great-grandmother's maiden name?
Elvige Duarmus. That's how it started out, and that's what's on some church papers and stuff. But it's the derivative of Dumas, and that's what eventually they wound up putting on there. But
and then your great-great-grandfather, Captain Edgar Doucette.
He's the one that was a schooner, and he ran. He donated the land for the school, but he grew up down there too. So I don't have information about his parents and and stuff. I do know that he
and the
had
person
sisters.
he's with here.
It's Mrs. Mosler, Mrs. Evelyn Mosler. That's who the family that bought the land that he had to sell. And Mrs. Mosler was the lady that my daddy worked for. He worked for she and her husband for the time he was 13 years old. As Daddy tells it, he was that Bigfoot boy walking down the road, and Mr. Mosler needed some help in his yard. So he went in and started helping him in his yard. And when Daddy turned 80 years old, he decided it was time to quit working for Mr. Mosler. He had done enough by that time. But
and this is the house that
this is the house that my grandmother and it was my grandmother's house. This is one that her husband, who was my great grandfather, built. It's over 100 years old, and of course what's left of it after Katrina is some of the old beaded boards and the beautiful carved mantels and the pictures around the mantels. But at that time they had the house, which was living quarters, because the kitchen was disconnected from the house for fear of fires.
So this is the kitchen to the left of it.
The kitchen is to the left, and the la cave is to the right. With the mixture of French, the la cave was a shed. Okay. My sister can tell you a story about that, but everything, good things were stored in this shed. It wasn't so much tools, and there was a cup and saucer on the shelf in the la cave, and my sister went in there one day and she picked up the cup to look at it, and there was a snake coiled around that, and she broke the cup and the saucer and she ran. But grandmother didn't have that one anymore to do.
On this picture, who is this crawling?
That's my sister. She was always underfoot in the kitchen when my great-grandmother was cooking.
So she's the one that broke the cup.
She's the one who broke the cup and found the snake, right. She's a music teacher. She's a retired music teacher now, too.
Now, where did she teach?
She taught in North Louisiana. She lives in Columbia, and she taught in Columbia and Monroe.
Okay.
In North Louisiana.
Tell us about the stove. That looks like
that's one of those. It was a expensive wooden stove, and of course you had to cut wood to put in the stove. And during those times, the old people spoke Creole and not much English, but they didn't want the children. My sister, she was around them more often, so she speaks more. But I can give you a horse and, certain things and stuff. And
so who is that sitting on the step?
That's my great-grandmother and my sister in the center, and my mother on the right. And that's the house. That's the old house that's still standing with some modifications and different things around it.
And you said that's over 100 years old.
Oh, the house is over 100 years old because when my great-grandmother got married, her husband brought her into that house. This is a picture of her husband there. But he brought her into that house as his new bride, and that was around 1905, 1906.
Wow.
Something like
Wouldn't that be great to get that fixed up?
I would love to have it fixed up, but so far,
Need to
no
find
dice.
Money.
That's
to find
it.
Money.
You don't have it. You don't have it to spare.
So you did not go to school at Doucette School?
No, I didn't go to school, but I was close enough so I got to walk over there. The dog and I would walk with my sister to school, and then we'd hang around a little bit, and then we'd walk back home. This was before copiers and ditto machines and mimeograph machines, so the old-fashioned way to make copies was to get a pan. There was a gel of some kind that you put in this pan, and you took the ditto master and turned it onto that and let it sit there, and it absorbed into that. And you took a sheet of paper at a time, and you put that paper on that, and you laid it aside because you had your copy, and you did another sheet. So you did that 30 times if it happened to be 30 children in the classroom. But it was fun, and that's the kind of things I got to do. I went to help them. One of the ladies that lived next door to the school was the cafeteria worker. She cooked meals. They had hot meals served. There was a stove in the back. It was like a one-room school. Some of the teachers, and that was the funniest thing, because between three people we remembered the names of just about all of the teachers that ever taught there, because so many of them lived. Some were certified and some were not. Mr. J.D. Burkhalter was one of the teachers, and he was certified, and Mr. Scholastic Peters was another teacher. We had Miss Powell, Miss Harris, Miss Murray, and all of these people came and lived at my grandmother's house.
But when did it shift from the summer to the full school year? Do you remember?
I don't remember when it shifted, but I know, but it was a break in there, you know, because my uncles went to St. Tammany, but during the time my daddy was in school, so it was somewhere right in that era. But around 1948, 49, I guess the number of children had dropped and stuff, or it was too expensive to pay the teacher and maintain out there, so the Doucette School was closed. The building lasted for a long time, but eventually that land was sold also to somebody in the area. I think the name might have been Ferrier or something like that, who eventually bought the property. But then the children went to St. Tammany, and it was about that time that I started school. And during those times, you went to pre-primer, and then you went to first grade, and then you went to second grade. Well, when I got there, I went to pre-primer for one day because I knew everything that I needed to know in pre-primer. It was preparing and stuff, and thank goodness for Mom and Daddy. I knew my alphabets and my numbers and such, so I was put in first grade. Went on through school, got to second grade, and that's when I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I had wonderful teachers at St. Tammany. It was a really different type of thing at that time from where I worked. But I went to all grades, and stick in your head names, because I started thinking about this, getting ready to come here. And I said, oh, you can name all of your teachers from the time you were in first grade till you were in 8th grade, And I said, well, that's pretty good. But those teachers were people who came there, and they stayed there, and they taught, and they taught, and they taught, for years and stuff. And then they moved on. I went into high school because St. Tammany was kindergarten through 12th grade, and everybody went there. And then I got to substitute as a student. A lot of times when the teachers were out and not a lot of notification, and there were not a lot of substitutes around at that time. They'd pull the seniors and the high school students out to come and substitute. I can remember I taught, when I was a senior, I taught in the 3rd grade for at least 2 weeks solid because the teacher was out ill.
What a wonderful experience.
It was.
And you were bused from home to St. Tammany?
Yeah, that had gotten to be an awkward situation too early on, because they would pick us up first in the morning and bring us home last in the afternoon. And Daddy said, that's too long for those babies. So he went and talked to somebody at the school board office, and they arranged it. We were still picked up first, but we were also the first ones dismissed and got to be sent home early. That was cooperation. Everything worked out fine.
I think they still try to do that with transportation.
I think they really do,
So that started with your daddy.
Started way back with my daddy, way back when, yeah. They had a hand in a lot of things like that.
So what did you do after after high school?
I went to Southern University in Baton Rouge, and that was a good experience. Of course, I had been at home. My sister went to Xavier University in New Orleans, and I was at home, and I knew that it was a financial struggle. Now, she had help because the family that my daddy worked for paid all of her tuition for 4 years at Xavier. But even the other little money was hard to come up with, at school. So Mama and Daddy struggled. They made it. when it was time for me to go, I said, I don't have to do this. They wanted me to go to Xavier too. I says, no, I can go to a state school. I don't have to go to one like that. So I went to Southern University in Baton Rouge. I had some small scholarships because I was a smart girl. I finished in the top of my class, And I enjoyed being there, and I told Mama, I says, I want to take a job. So I didn't work my freshman year, but I worked my sophomore and junior year until it was time for me to do student teaching, and that was sort of different. And I did my student teaching at the lab school in Baton Rouge. But every time it was time to pay tuition, Daddy sold a cow. They raised cattle, at the house. It was open range at that time, so that we fed the cattle during the winter time, but in the summertime they were out free to roam. And they took care of themselves, basically. But we got a cow as a child. We got a calf, and that was ours. But then sometimes we wanted to sell them, and sometimes we didn't because we pet them too much. But anyway, we sold cattle every time it was time to pay tuition. And that's where the money came from for our college education. And it happened for all three of us because the baby boy came along later on, and he went to college the same way. But things were different. There were three of us, and we had all sorts of different interests. My sister was in the arts. I loved typing and shorthand and the business things, and so I did that era. Mom and Dad bought her a piano. They bought me a typewriter. And then my brother came along, and he loved nothing better than to fish and hunt and do that with my daddy. So he got the gun, and then he got a motorcycle on top of that. He grew up and said he was one of the few people he knew that got to have fun at work doing the same thing he did for fun when he was growing up, because he was a biologist and ichthyologist and studied fish. So he got to do it over and over again, even in his work. And we lost him in 2004. He had cancer. But at the time, he was assistant to the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Southeastern Louisiana University in Hammond.
I know Melody Swang thought a great deal of him.
Good friends. He got to Melody when he was still teaching biology, I think. It was a whole group of friends. And he was a lovable person, so you couldn't help but, he put that Doucette charm on them, and they were lost.
When you were in college, did you major as a librarian? Did you get certified? Or?
No, I loved to type. I was a business major. I was certified secondary and secondary business education.
So what did you do after college? How did you get into education?
I went to Michoud. I graduated, first of all, in January. And if you're going to be a teacher, that's not a good time to graduate. But I graduated in January. And no jobs in education at that time, so I applied with the Boeing company at Michoud because that was open and running high. And they liked my librarian degree, so I was a technical librarian for Boeing. When they set the rockets off to test, they got the data back in sheets and stuff, and we had to transfer it to cards and stuff. And that was nice, but I got married and had a little boy, and I needed to be home and around them, more often than that. And what better way to do that than to teach? I had my mother who helped me. She took care of him. She took care of my daughter. But I applied, and I was hired. I went to interview at the school board with Mr. Henry Mayfield during that time. He was still there, and I think he retired not too long after that, because it was right around the 60, 68 and something like that is when I went in August of 68 to Florida Avenue Elementary School. Now, he told me, he says, now, you realize that you're going to be one of the first black teachers going into the school. They've never had black teachers at Florida Avenue before, so you're going to be one of the first. He says, but don't go to the school until it's time. I don't want you going hanging around. So the first day of school was the day that I walked in, and there was so much to be done, But I had lots of help. I had an aide in the library at that time, and Chris Ransom was my aide, and she was a jewel, and she helped me get started. But it was new to me, but it felt old because it was a comfortable fit. I worked for Mr. Dealer Smith. He became a supervisor or something.
Assistant
superintendent in the school system after he left there, but he was the principal there. And the three teachers that went in, one taught 5th grade, one taught 6th grade, and I was in the library, so I saw everybody. Good programs, we did well. One teacher had brought her son, so she had some problems, and there was still some chips and stuff on the shoulders and stuff at different times, hers as well as other people's too, you know. So she left after the first year, and they hired another black teacher and stuff. But Mary Frances Evans was the other teacher that was there with me, and she eventually left when her husband got transferred, but she spent quite a few years there with me. I can remember talking with other people about it. When we first went, you know how skepticism, you don't know the unknown. They didn't know what kind of teachers these people were going to be, that we were going to be. So they gave them arts. They taught the arts, and they taught PE. And so, you know the old story, if you give somebody lemons, you make lemonade out of it. That's what they did. They got in there, they dressed the part, they wore their blue and their white, and they had one of the best PE programs going at Florida Avenue at that time that you ever want to see. And I guess it was noted and stuff, and they realized that these people really can teach, you know, so that it was good.
Well, you have a special connection to the PE teacher over there now, don't you?
Yes, I do. That's my daughter. I have plenty connections and stuff because the girl who replaced me was my daughter's classmate, and she also went to Florida Avenue. So,
well, you've taught a lot of interesting people over the years, and some that are very special in this.
Yeah, some that you'll remember. I did not have Mr. Lamarck, Mr. John Lamarck, but his brother was at Florida Avenue when I went there, and I taught him and got to know his mother, who was a jewel. She was with the PTA. And then, of course, Mr. Folse lived close by, and so I got to have all of Bill Folse's children, including Trey and David and Eric and Lynette. All of them went through there. And he was so funny sometimes. Bill Folse came into my library, and I was so proud about how clean it was. And I said, I'm so glad you came to see me and stuff. He says, it looks good in here, but he walked over to the door, and he ran his finger over the sill of the door to see if it was dusty. But it wasn't. And so we had good. But also, Mr. Jabbier's boys went to school there. We have doctors in Slidell and pharmacists, and you name the occupations, dentist, the podiatrist, you know.
And you have a couple of pictures here.
Yeah. That's some former students. This is Dr. Baralt right here, and this is Frankie Jabbier. I think Frankie's, what, assistant principal?
Assistant principal now.
At North Shore, somewhere in Slidell. Yeah. All these are good times, but it was good working in there.
How did you get into being such a wonderful storyteller?
My daddy. We grew up, and we'd be working in the garden, planting potatoes, planting this, and my daddy would go into a song. And I said, what was that song, Daddy? And he said, oh, that was the story. That was a story they told us, and then he'd go ahead and tell me the story. And we listened to that and enjoyed that, and we sat on the steps sometimes, and he would just do story after story after story.
What's your favorite story? Do you have a favorite story?
Now?
Or that was your favorite story over the years to tell?
My favorite stories to tell were the Uncle Remus stories. Br'er Rabbit and Br'er Bear and old Br'er Fox, you know. Ooh!
Can you give us a little snippet of it?
Duh, what you mean? I'm making $1 a minute. I'm not making a fool of myself. And Br'er Fox says, oh, yes you are. That rabbit done fooled you again. And Br'er Rabbit sits over on the fence just a picking tar after the tar baby. I one more time, and lickety-split, he's off and running again. But I thoroughly enjoyed all of those stories. But
That's wonderful.
I enjoyed it with the children, and the children enjoyed it. You can sit and read, but if you just read, they're not going to be interested. But you got to put a little something else into it. And I did, and they enjoyed it.
And I believe you've done workshops over the years for teachers and librarians.
I've done several workshops. When I was a librarian, we had lots of input and stuff from each other. We did workshops with the teachers. We gave them bibliographies and lots of different things to work from and work with there. But I enjoyed the storytelling aspect. I even told stories at Tulane University one time. It was good. I did a lot of Southern Association visits, and that was always interesting to do that. Yeah, that was one that I did. My principal, Elaine Mott, couldn't go, and Miss Sloan asked her to send a substitute, and I was her substitute, and Miss Sloan was our chairman on that one.
So she's standing right there beside you?
Yeah, with the mascot from the Zephyrs team. That was big to do, and that was their partner in education at the school, and I can't remember the name of it.
That was 1998, I believe.
Right. It was way back when. It was not too long before I left.
What are some of your favorite memories from teaching?
Oh, I got to meet so many neat people, nice families. We did, my aide and I worked for 30 years. I had 3 principals that I worked under, Dealer Smith, Charles Summerall, and Elaine Mott. Wonderful people to work with.
Alice, I hate to say this, but we're almost out of time, and I just wonder if there was anything that you haven't had an opportunity to share.
The only thing I like to share is I still go back, volunteer, and I go back and I do Black history with the children, and I try to explain. I mentioned to one of the students the other day, just in talking, that I was one of the first Black teachers that came to Florida Avenue, and he was just fascinated, and he just kept, this was a 6th grader, and he just kept asking questions. But I go in and I try to explain to the children. It's hard sometimes for them to understand, Black students, white students, anybody, why we respect people like Dr. Martin Luther King, and why the change in the civil rights movements. Why did we have to do that? And I lived it. I can go back and I can talk to them, and I can explain in a language that they can understand that all of the students I went to school with were Black students. They never experienced that. I said, you and I couldn't go to Burger King and sit down and eat a hamburger together during that time.
It's amazing to think about that today, isn't it?
I know. When we traveled, when I was a little girl and we traveled, Mama made sandwiches all the time. And we brought a cooler, or a bucket actually, not a cooler, with soft drinks and stuff in it. I grew up before the refrigerator and the television. I was in 5th grade when we got our first television. And the refrigerator, you'd butcher a cow and you had to spread the meat and stuff around because there was no refrigerator to keep it. But you gave this one some of the meat, and they brought you some potatoes or some greens or something out of their garden. It was a sharing. They brought a chicken, they brought eggs and stuff. But it's good. Yeah. It's good to live now.
We have a couple more pictures here that maybe before we close you can tell us about.
This was a picture of my brother graduating his first degree from Southern University, and he got others from LSU and stuff, and he was a doctor. He was a PhD. And this was around 1952, a picture of my mom and dad, my sister and brother. It showed the ages
family.
in that. Mm-hmm. And then I just brought some pictures of storytelling, dress-up days at school.
Tell us about this hat you have on here.
In that hat, that's my storytelling hat. It was a hat day at school, and I wore my storytelling hat. And in the old countries, when the storyteller would walk into the town, She would either be wearing a hat or she'd wear an apron. From that hat was strings, and on the end of each string there was an article. It might have been a dog, it might have been a chicken, it might have been anything. And she would let a child pick one thing. Whatever that child chose was the story that the storyteller told at that time.
Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, Dr. Seuss days, the Cajun Christmas days and stuff. That's from the Heritage Festival. We used to do Heritage Day in the school system, and Dr. Joan Archer interviewed Dad and I, and Daddy loved it because way back when there was a brick yard not far from where he lived, and they would ask him when he was coming if he had a prop, and the prop that Daddy always brought was this oversized brick. It became part of St. Genevieve's Church, and that was what he brought as his prop, because when they demolished the old church, he had the brick left over from that. But good years and bad years.
This wasn't Katrina.
That wasn't Katrina. That was in this May, I guess. I think it was May of 1995 or sometime in 1995. My library looked like a swimming pool. I lost all of the books that were on the bottom shelves because it flooded. And this was a recessed area, sunken area, reading area.
You're standing knee-deep in water.
I'm standing knee-deep in water.
And then our final one.
Storytelling again. We had a whale of a tale. We did whales and stuff. We had this great big stuffed whale in the gym, and we did stories leading up to the children's visit to that.
My final question is, if you could give some advice to young students who are thinking about going into education, or people who are beginning teachers going into education, what would you tell them?
Use good judgment. If you don't love the child or want to be around the children, don't teach. You have to enjoy it. You need to first like what you're doing. And if you don't like it, you can't bring it across to anybody else.
And after talking with you today, I can tell you still love what you do and love being at the school and teaching. And we're so blessed that we've had you in St. Tammany and that you're still there sharing with everybody. And I thank you so much for coming today and sharing with us.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Well, that's our show for today. I want to offer special thanks to our guest, Alice Twillie, for being with us and sharing some great stories as we learn more about St. Tammany and our outstanding school district. We hope you, our viewers, have enjoyed the show and will join us again for Reflections, where we discover how what has happened in the past can influence our future.